30 some odd years, our kids all went through the Park Ridge school system, public school system. I myself was a teacher for 46 years over at Pascack Valley High School in Hillsdale. I just recently retired in June. I'm obviously a strong supporter of public education, as I'm sure all of you are, and as our candidates are. Okay, it's a little bit about me. I'll let you each introduce yourselves.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sinead Jensen. I am a parent here in Park Ridge. I have two kids, 4th and 1st grade. I have over 15 years experience in education in various capacities, so Catholic education, public school, and now charter. In my recent role, I am the director of enrollment, and so supporting our school with compliance, state reporting, budgets, and I'm excited to run for this position. Why? For the kids, putting them first and making sure that all of our kids' needs are met, while also being mindful of the tough decisions that I'm going to have to make, but it starts here and it starts now, so that's my why.
First, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. My name is Rosemary Malloy. I have been a proud Park Ridge resident for 20 years with my husband. Both he and I are committed to public service. He's a police captain in a nearby town, and I've been a public school educator for 28 years in several different Bergen County schools, everything from K through 12th grade. I've had multiple capacities in education. I always say first and foremost, I'm a teacher. Currently I'm an 8th grade math teacher, but I've been an administrator holding various roles as math supervisor, personnel. I've done hiring, staff development. I was dean of students, so I bring a wealth of knowledge about how schools function. I've always worked with Board of Education members on a different role as an advocate for schools, but I think that's my number one priority, is to be an advocate for students, all learners, making things accessible for all students. I was an enrichment teacher. I also have a lot of personal knowledge about special education, so I bring a wealth of knowledge, and I bring a commitment. I will be present, I will listen, and I will hopefully bring some consensus to the board. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Rossi. I've lived in town for 22 years. My wife and I raised two sons that recently graduated Park Ridge High School. My dad was a teacher, so I do know the benefit and the value of a great education and how that's the building blocks for success. I'm in the financial services industry for now 30 years, held roles as a chief operating officer, chief compliance officer. I believe I have the expertise and the skills to help our district provide the highest quality education while being financially responsible to our residents. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Okay, thank you. And our first topic is about growth and overdevelopment and enrollment projections. And the question is, given the concerns in the community about overdevelopment and how that may increase student enrollment, how would you plan for future capacity for class size and facility needs without overly burdening taxpayers?
Great question. Great question. I think, again, putting students first and understanding and being mindful of class size, making sure that it's accessible and safe for all of our students. But I'm not without rationale and making sure that I have the data, talking to various stakeholders, right? So our city planners, the zoning board, like various constituents, to help us inform the best way to proceed. Like me as one person cannot like hold all the answers, but it takes a collective, a team of individuals who are on the ground doing the actual work, getting that data, taking it to the team to be able to make a informed decision.
So I think we need to continuously monitor actual data. So working with our mayor and council and understanding what our enrollment is looking like and the projection for each year. Definitely being creative and looking for grants. Are there services that we can share? For example, are there services to to share physical therapists or occupational therapists. So again, not at the cost of class size or at the cost of impact on students, but being creative in our problem solving. And then I think also looking at our spaces and being creative in our flexible learning spaces. So, how can we maximize our classrooms and the educational spaces that we have in the 3 buildings? And lastly, I am a big proponent of maintaining class size, especially in the K2. I think small class sizes for K2 is essential to the foundation of good education for students.
That's great. I think the first step is really to evaluate, right? To analyze the potential impact, reviewing existing demographics studies or even new ones that we might need to commission to really create that long-term forecast. And then the next step is to assess, right? Assess the district's capacity and its shortfalls, then develop a multi-year forecast and a multi-year facilities plan designed to solve our long-term needs while remaining financially responsible to the residents. And then the third is to figure out how to fund those initiatives. I definitely believe collaborating with the town council, maybe getting them to favor age-restricted housing or to develop, to institute developer impact fees, maybe seek state funding and construction grants, and then explore shared services with other districts.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next question is about the balance of fiscal responsibility versus quality. Park Ridge is relatively small, and any board of education may have to make trade-offs. If you had to choose between a new program or a modest tax reduction, which would you prioritize and why? And Rosemary will go first.
Sure. So I believe that every dollar has to have a measurable outcome. So when we look at programs, if it is a new program, is it something that we can sustain over time, not just for a short period of time? So we have to really be careful when we bring in, let's say, new staff for a new program or a new initiative if we're not able to sustain it long term. I also want to prioritize programs that have direct student impact, but we also have to realize that there's a trade-off, right? As taxpayers, we have to be mindful that a large percentage of school funding comes from local taxes. So that is not going away, I don't think at any time soon, but also being mindful of the impact it has on the community. But at the core, our public schools are so critical to our property values, and we have to really consider, a small savings could have a major impact long term.
I agree. From my perspective, and just generalizing, but I would always prioritize new programs and enrichment. I think those programs improve the quality of the education for our students. They keep the schools competitive. They make them attractive to new families. And great schools, you hit it on the head, it's property values, right? You could be penny wise and dollar foolish and save a little bit on taxes, but you'd have an outsized loss on your property taxes. So clear to me that enrichment and keeping the schools great is important.
So when it comes to this question, enrichment and after-school activities are something that is near and dear to me. We need these outside co-curriculars essentially to keep our kids wanting to stay engaged in our school environment. And I look to you, Emery, because you are my child. Sorry. But yes, in terms of programs, it again must be measurable. The goals and the outcomes, it's good to have good rationale and why we want to have these programs, if they're going to be effective or not, right? And then the impact on the product being our children. And so making sure that the programs and curriculum and enrichment is going to positively impact our kids. And so looking at all of those things, as well as the budget, the finance, obviously that comes into play. But I'm more concerned about the impact of our students and whether or not it's going to be an effective program.
Thank you. And on the topic of technology, infrastructure, and security upgrades, how do you assess the current state of school infrastructure in Park Ridge, and what upgrades or investments would you advocate for in the short or medium term? Matthew first.
Great. Well, based on the last board meeting, it was clear that the Building and Grounds Committee is telling us that we're going to be facing some important initiatives and projects over the next few years, like the school roofs and the fields and et cetera. But before advocating for any specific solution, to me, it's always important to educate yourself first. I'd like to understand where things stand today, what's been planned for already, and then I'd get to work finding solutions once we get the lay of the land. I believe my experience running highly complex and multi-year projects gives me the tools to ask the right questions, develop a full picture of the district's needs, and then build both short and long-term plans and the related budgets.
Yes. This is one area where I would look to kind of like the educators and the people that actually like do this work. Technology has been kind of a soft spot for us at Eastbrook in terms of like the technology, not necessarily technology, but like internet and like phone service at our school. So that is something that like I would want to look more into, seeing where our current state is, getting feedback from them, and again, using the collective of power lines to make an informed decision.
So the board has a standing committee on infrastructure, technology, and facilities. So seeing where their work is, have there been short and long-term goals established, but also building or learning from the people in the building, whether it's the building and grounds director, the director of technology, and really speaking to them to see where we are, where maybe we have some challenges, and our long-term planning for those. We really need to look at capital planning, how we can utilize the money that we have to address some of the facility issues. And technology is ever evolving, and we need to stay current with it, giving the best tools to our students. And again, going back to those learning spaces and just looking at how we can utilize those learning spaces in the best way possible.
And on the topic of equity and differentiated support, there are always students who need extra support. How would you ensure that those students don't get left behind? And I believe you're first.
Me? Where I work in my school, there's various ways that we collect data on our students. It's not just academic, right? It's focus groups. It's how many kids or students are active in the programs or activities that we serve. And so using that data and rationale to make decisions that'll impact them, right? Speaking to parents, of course, but hearing from the students, because they have a voice, and like don't discard their voice as a way or a tool to like help us and make decisions that are that's in the best interest of them. And so, yeah.
So I think it's really important when we look at student progress and areas of support to look at data, especially in K-6, on literacy scores and math scores, and identifying students as early as possible, whether it's in basic skills remediation, developing an individual learning plan, but identifying the students as early as possible so that we can get them the support to really thrive in an academic program that's suited for them. I have experience being an enrichment teacher as well, and we can't just think about our students that maybe struggle academically, but we need to think about the students that are achieving and meeting grade level standards when they come in September, and how we can address their needs as high achieving learners. And lastly, we also need to think about just support for students that maybe are need social emotional support or counseling. And, I think it's important to be mindful that it's not just academic. Students need to feel safe and respected and want to have good social connections. So finding ways for us to support students. And one thing that I'm extremely proud of, I was talking to a few parents that asked about like the middle school and high school experience. I think being in such a small district, sometimes there's a trade-off, but I think it allows the staff to really know our students, and when they need support, whether it's academic, social, emotionally, they are there for the students. So that's, I think, something that we should be proud of, and the staff identifying who needs support and where and how.
I believe it's our duty to give every student an equal opportunity to succeed. And so first, I would educate myself on the specific needs of our students through conversations with other board members, the superintendent, faculty, families as appropriate. And then with that full understanding, I'd advocate for new policies or changes to existing policies to ensure that every student gets the most support possible within the realities of our financial resources.
And on the topic of curriculum, innovation, and college readiness, Park Ridge High School offers AP courses, and the district shows relatively strong outcomes in these courses. What new curricula, new pathways, or innovations would you like to see introduced or expanded? I believe you go first.
Thank you. So this is an area that I have a lot of professional experience in. AP classes and offering a variety of AP classes is really important, but there are other pathways through what's called Option 2. So this is specifically an example for high school, but Option 2 is mandated by the state that each school have options for students that are seeking alternatives. So it could be beyond AP classes where students take dual enrollment classes. I've had partnerships with Seton Hall and Ramapo and Fairleigh Dickinson, so we can explore dual enrollment classes where students are earning college credits in high school. Another area is the technology and trades, so not every student, maybe college is not in their pathway, and we need to find alternatives for students. So being such a small school district, maybe we can't offer it here, but there are outside resources and regional high schools that we can partner with. I know we already partner with Pascack Valley and Pascack Hills with an internship program. So just expanding that, but really communicating that to parents and students, because many parents or students don't know that these pathways exist. So those are just some things that I would really advocate for, where we're offering opportunities for all students.
Okay, this is an area that really I don't have much expertise in, so to speak, but as a parent of recent high school graduates, I can attest that the AP courses and the curricula overall prepare them well for college. So if elected as a board member, I'd like to understand the curricula, so I consult with the experts to educate myself on the district's needs and learn from the other board members, the superintendent, and the faculty. That said, the board doesn't determine the curricula for the district, right? Those decisions rest with the teachers and the faculty. So, our role is to make sure the curricula complies with the state guidelines and then find ways to fund those programs accordingly. And that would be where my focus is.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't think she did.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
I think similar to what Matt said about like the role of the school board and just ensuring that we are making sure that the district is running efficiently by creating goals, vision, policy, and ensuring that like the boots on the ground, right, the superintendent, the teachers, the principal are the ones executing on this work. And so it's upon us as a school board to ensure that, one, we have the right policies in place, ensuring that all of our AP courses are then translated into college credits. That's something really big and where I currently work. Kids are graduating, depending on the amount of AP course that they take, with college credits. So they're already like leaving with an associate's degree when they go on So I feel like that's a really big kind of point or feature to like focus on and ensure that we are being mindful of. But again, it's also the superintendent, the teachers, the directors. They're the ones that are creating action plans and executing that work. We as the board, if elected, kind of create the vision and the goals and the policies around what that will look like.
On the topic of community engagement and transparency, what methods will you use to keep parents, teachers, and residents informed and to solicit their input? For example, how would you structure public forums, surveys, or committee work to reflect the community's voice? And Matthew will go first.
Sure. First, I'd stress that no board member acts alone, right? And there's also lots of legal considerations to navigate when you're, when you're talking about privacy and things of that nature. So we must be thoughtful about how we engage, the public in a public setting. That said, I'm all for creative ways to learn and share with the community. I'd like to see listening sessions or town halls that discuss issues in a less formal setting outside of a formal board meeting. Regular meetings with the PTOs and other parent groups. Teacher and staff committees work directly with the board. And then I do believe in using community surveys to get feedback on major initiatives that we're going to face.
Yes. Again, me alone cannot like communicate with the community as like my own person. We are a collective, the school board. However, I am very active in our current school and PTO like presidents and just kind of communicating with them, seeing where their membership and what concerns them, and that kind of using that information to then bring to the collective and the greater those conversations.
Yeah, so thinking about how our PTOs are structured, having them engage with the principals in their building and communicating through the principals to the superintendent, and thinking about that chain of command. Again, we can't hold a forum individually to have parents, give their input or community give their input. There are, like Matt said, ethical considerations when you become a school board member, but also utilizing the superintendent. I think the superintendent and the building administrators are ones that can really engage with the parents and community for input. And opening communication at board meetings and encouraging the board to listen to community members at board meetings and really consider their points of view. I also would like engagement through the superintendent to have informal talks. So when we look to have a new superintendent, that's something that I think is really important, because the superintendent needs to have an understanding of our unique community, what we value, and through informal coffee talks, the public can share their concerns with that person, and then the superintendent can bring it not only to the building administrators, but also to the Board of Education.
Okay, on the topic of accountability and metrics for success, which metrics would you set for the district? And how would you monitor those metrics? And how would you hold the administration accountable for those metrics? I believe Sinead goes first, is that right?
In terms of metrics, again, you want to look at state data, right, student test scores, but you also want to look at the data that is coming from the schools, from the middle school, from the high school, looking at all different data points to make a decision.
So there are many data metrics, as Sinead said, whether it's state testing, state scores, post-graduate success, college acceptance, our course offerings. So there's a lot of data that we have at our fingertips, but we have to always be mindful of just focusing maybe on one data point. We should look at everything, because that paints a wide picture of our student success. Also, I think it's important that we always look at student success and then make decisions accordingly. So setting goals, that's a big responsibility for the superintendent and the Board of Education. So setting short-term goals as well as long-term goals. So that could be looking at, for example, one year, maybe our math scores are going down, not only by grade level, but also by cohort of students. So being able to analyze that data and looking at what goals are we going to make to improve that. So very specific and measurable goals. And we would be working with curriculum director, the principals, the supervisors, and of course the staff, and having professional development in those areas. But again, very specific. We should be looking not only at our short-term data, but long-term data. Is there an area that we would like to improve upon? And then it's up to us to come up with that goal, and the administration to come up with the, how we achieve those goals.
Great. I'd look at metrics like student growth percentiles, achievement gap metrics, percentage of students taking advanced coursework or being enrolled in career programs, and teacher retention rates as well. And then for accountability, I think it's important to set clear goals and expectations each school year. We need to measure our faculty on the agreed upon performance indicators against established goals through quarterly and annual evaluations. And most importantly, I believe we need to tie up their success, the leadership success, and their incentives to student success, fiscal responsibility, and community engagement.
Thanks.
All right. Board dynamics and conflict resolution. If and when board members disagree, how will you foster civil deliberation, consensus building, and avoid gridlock? What is your philosophy on collaboration within the board?
I think it's me. Yes. Okay. So disagreement is natural and it's healthy. So I think what's important is that we act professionally and respectful, be civil, and look to build consensus. This is an area that I think is a personal strength of mine, having so many different perspectives, not only as a teacher, supervisor, administrator, parent, community member. I've given board presentations. I've sat in with the board to talk about personnel issues, really difficult decisions that had to be made and information communicated. I think it's important for us to not only be well informed, but ask really tough questions. So I am a professional. I think I pride myself on being respectful and listening to others' opinions. And I think you need to be present. That's a huge point where you have to be fully engaged and fully invested. And I think I bring a sincerity to the role where it's not for personal gain or political gain, but it's really for the success of our students. And if we keep that at the forefront, I almost feel like if we could have a little saying on a bulletin board in our board conference room, where we always keep the students at the forefront of all of our decisions, then I think we would be respected with even difficult decisions.
So in my professional life, my approach has always been to establish a shared mission and common goals. Focus on objective facts, prioritize positive outcomes, find common ground, and then engage in respectful discourse when we have disagreements. Generally, I have 3 rules when I'm working on a committee or a team. It's keep an open mind, be able to compromise, and establish a culture where we all can change our mind when new facts are presented to us.
I think similar to what both Matt and Rosemary said, I'm very open, I'm very honest, I'm very respectful of other people's opinion, and I'm also vulnerable enough to know when I don't have all the answers. And so using the expertise of those around me, whether it's the superintendent, other committee and board members to help make decisions on, again, what's best for our students. And so, again, just keeping that in the forefront and in our minds that, like, one, we're doing this for the community, for our kids, and just being respectful, for sure.
On the topic of succession, hiring, and oversight of leadership, if you are elected, what qualities would you look for in a superintendent, if you have to hire a superintendent, or a business administrator in future hiring? How would you structure performance reviews or oversight of those roles? I believe Matthew goes first.
So, as a son of a school teacher, I would look for someone who's been in that role and who can appreciate the stresses of being a teacher. As for the superintendent, I think it's someone that needs to be innovative and bring fresh ideas. They need to be able to articulate a clear vision aligned with community values. They need to be skilled at recruiting, developing, and retaining high-quality teachers, and find creative ways to deliver the best possible education within the realities of our financial resources. As for the business administrator, sure, they need a background in school finance, and they need state aid formulas and budgets and whatnot, but really they need to know how to maximize our resources while complying with the state requirements, and really aligning valuable taxpayer dollars to the district goals, not just balancing the budget. And holding them accountable, I think I mentioned it earlier, but it's setting the clear goals, it's the regular reporting, it's structured evaluations, and most importantly, it's performance incentives directly tied to student success and fiscal responsibility.
I have done this in my former life as when I worked at the Archdiocese of New York in Newark, hiring principals and teachers. And so, one, a superintendent that's been in all of the roles, right? Teacher, AP, principal, kind of understand the different dynamics of the school and how it functions and works. Definitely experience in the role, and kind of having a committee with teachers, principals, and even parents, right? That can provide their opinion and their judgment on the individual candidate. When it comes to accountability, again, everything falls back to our vision, mission, and goals, right? And so everything that is done in that superintendent role, in that principal role, in that teacher role, again, goes back to our vision and mission and goals. And if they don't comply or not align in that way, then that's a conversation that we must have. But again, it all goes back to what we set, the policy, vision, mission, and goals that helps us to set the stage for our leadership.
So I've been part of the superintendent search in another district, and I think it's important to first start with having focus groups or feedback groups of all stakeholders, and whoever is initiating, whether it's an outside organization or the Board of Education, to create a profile of what we value and what we're looking for in a superintendent. Similarly, I think it's important to have a lot of vast or varied experience, not just in administration, but really understanding every role within the school, from teacher through administrator, and finally to superintendent or in central office. I think we need someone who's visionary, can be creative in problem solving, communicate effectively with all groups, being able to listen to all groups on what is important to them, and really understanding our unique community. If you're coming from a regional school district, you may have resources or challenges that we don't have, and I think it's important for that person to understand our unique challenges, but also the things that we value here in Park Ridge. And then in terms of holding the person accountable, that's always tied to district goals. So as a board, we're creating those district goals alongside the superintendent, and then holding the superintendent accountable for implementing them and how successful they are, and providing feedback. That's one of our big roles as a board, is to evaluate the superintendent, but also to provide feedback on things that are going well and things that we would like the superintendent to to continue to do so that our district continues to move forward.
Okay, our final topic before we open up the floor to general questions. Residency representation and local commitment. In a small community like Park Ridge, local connection matters. How do you intend to stay plugged into community life? How would you reassure voters of your commitment to Park Ridge, especially in light of past concerns about board members' physical presence or involvement? And
Great question. I, as a parent, two young children, I'm very involved. Don't you look at me. I am everywhere and nowhere. I am at sport events. I am volunteering at Multicultural Day. I've done that for 4 years. It's been a great success for our school. I'm around, and I may not be that person that is like representing the board when I am around, but I'm listening, and I hear things that they say, and I'm taking that information. I may not respond and like give you things in the moment because one, that's not the time or place, but I am listening, right? I am here and I'm around. You can find me, no doubt. I'm here.
Yep, so being a resident here for 20 years, this is where we spend our time shopping and engaging in different local activities. I'm very approachable, so again, I agree with Sinead where we're listening and we could always bring back concerns to the superintendent or the board as a whole. But I think just being present, I'm always fully committed, whether it's attending and supporting shows at the high school to graduation, but most importantly, being present and engaged at board meetings and being involved in as many committees and just being, I think, present not only visibly, but also where you're engaged and present in the work that you're doing as a board member.
So as I mentioned, I had two recent graduates from the high school, and I've been involved in their sports programs, and still feel like I'm plugged in with school, parents of school-aged children. I still attend school events, town events. In short, Park Ridge is my home, and I'm committed to it. And I'm very, that said, I'm very aware of the responsibility that comes with being a board member, and fully committed to staying engaged with the residents of the town.
Three great candidates. Everyone, I want to say it's been truly a pleasure to get to know you all better, and thank you so much for being here. We'd like to open up the floor. We have time, I believe, right? To open up the floor to general questions. I think I should step to the side. If you have a question, please just stand and introduce yourself, and you can direct the question to any one of the candidates, or all three of the candidates. Anyone?
Heather Benucci, live in the town, have a child who also is in one of Shanae's kids' grades. I think one thing that was touched on earlier, but I would love to hear more from each of you, is on infrastructure and security concerns in particular, given the current climate in the country. Is there anything on your minds that you might seek to explore more, just to make sure that our students are really safe, in addition to whatever is being done now? But also on the flip side of the same coin, I think we also touched somewhere on sort of social emotional wellness, but I think as students get older, they have a lot more awareness of what's happening, and so how do we make sure that students really truly feel safe and therefore able to learn in that environment?
I can answer first, if that's okay. So I think in terms of security, we always need to continuously learn, whether it's working with the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, our local PD. They're doing drills alongside administration. So, or when there is an incident in the school building, they're responding, and there's always a debrief. There's always, maybe we didn't see this vulnerability, or is there a way that we can do this better? And it's always learning, and it's always sharing. So the police departments are always in communication with each other. The prosecutor's office is always communicating best practices. So just being current, I think we always need to look to improve our security at the doors. That's beginning of school and the end of school are probably the two most vulnerable times. And we have to look to see what is happening, and if there are ways that we can better secure our buildings during those times. And then in terms of social emotional, is it related to school security or just safety in general?
I think security. I think kids are probably becoming more and more concerned about things they're seeing and hearing in the news, and just making sure that they feel safe.
Yeah, and I think I know administration often meets with students, particularly, let's say, in the middle school and high school, to talk about what to do in scenarios. They do practice. I think also having teachers, they're the ones with the students in the classroom, and really just building that relationship and knowing how to make students feel safe, even in their small classroom. It will transcend across, the school day. So building those relationships, and I think that's one strength that we have here, is that the staff knows the students, and administration knows every single student by name and knows what their needs are. So just continuing to build a safe classroom will build a safe building, will build a safe, district.
I think for me, transparency and communication is so important. At Eastbrook, internet and phone service is so flighty. And so for me, it's ensuring that that communication barrier is no longer present. If things are happening at other schools, so say for instance, there's an issue happening at OLM, there's an issue happening at Westridge, right? All parents are notified and communicated accordingly. Just because it's at a school doesn't mean that we all shouldn't be aware and alert of what's happening in our community. And just seeing ways that we can ensure that we are communicating and being transparent across all grade spans and all schools. When it comes to professional development in terms of the drills and the things that are happening, I leave that to our PD department, police department, to educate us, as well as the principals, our school's security guards that are there, Officer Joe, who is there every morning greeting us, just being aware of all of the nuances that are happening. But again, I think transparency and communication is key in ensuring that we keep a safe environment for our kids long term.
Yeah, I know that issue came up at the last board meeting. I think there was a parent that wanted to do some fundraising around that whole initiative. So it's clearly a priority. It needs to be. I think we need to engage the experts, to understand where our gaps and our limitations are, and then gather information. And it's a recurring theme, I think, that comes back to me all the time, to kind of gather that information, evaluate the need, and then make a decision to act. So I would say, I don't know the answers today, but I do think it needs to be a priority, especially given the culture and the climate we live in today.
Yeah. There was always the belief that every kid should go to college. I think the landscape that we are witnessing, that college always seemed, well, you gotta go. And in the age of AI, in the age of hiring practices, is there any thought on the part, or should there be a thought on the part of a board as to future planning for students? Because certainly, everybody here is younger than me. I have t-shirts older than people in this room. But I have seen that decisions in my life versus decisions I suspect in their lives were certainly, dare I say, as difficult as they were, easier. Because you knew, well, I take this road, I know what's down the end of the road. Right now, none of us know, and it could be that the bridge is out. So the question I would ask is, would it be incumbent upon a board to look at future planning so that their guidance function sees what's down the road when they're guiding their students?
Yeah, I think the school does some of this today in terms of career programs and internships and getting students prepared for life after high school, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean college, especially given the return on investment today that people have to trade off with college costs being so expensive. So, I think the board's role is to set policy and oversee the curricula so that students are prepared for life after high school, whether they decide to go to college or not. And you're right, with the technology advancements, who knows what's going to be waiting for them when they get out of school after their senior year.
Yeah, a large group of curricular standards in the state of New Jersey is information literacy. To me, personally, that is a critical component of students' education. So again, as a board member, ensuring that there are, how we're implementing that and meeting those standards, thank you, meeting those standards, because being able to navigate information is probably the #1 skill students need outside of literacy skills and math skills. I also believe that every path of students' path is not linear. I have a niece and nephew that graduated Park Ridge, and they did military first and then decided to go to college or education after that. So I think we have to be mindful that not every student is college bound, and that shouldn't be represented at a board meeting like it was, where not going to college and not going to an elite college is the way that we measure student success, because I firmly believe success is different for every single student, and we have to grow that, we have to nurture it, whether it's through programs, through guidance, and giving staff tools to understand that it's not just about college, right? It's also just career and life readiness.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. Not every student has the same pathway of going to college. Every student learns different. Every student has a different thing that excites them and brings them joy. And so it's upon us as a board to ensure that we have policies in place that ensure that all of our students have various pathways to success, whatever that means for them, right? Not everyone is going to play sports and get into the NBA or the NFL, or they may be on Broadway. There's various avenues that kids can go, and just one, being mindful of that as a school board member, but then also looking to the high school leaders who are in the building and making sure that they are equipped with the tools necessary and resources necessary to ensure that our students are successful.
Okay, so October is National Banned Books Month. Sorry, brain heat. During the 2024-25 school year, 6,870 books across 23 states and 87 public school districts were challenged or removed from schools and libraries across the U.S. Can you give us your thoughts on that, please?
I think for me, it is not the school board's role to ban books from schools. I am not an educator. I am not the librarian. I am not the one choosing and deciding what books students should read. That's teachers, parents, students, right? And so again, a collective, as a board member, as serving on committees, again,
focus on goals, we focus on policy, we focus on vision. It's up to the school, superintendent, principals, directors, teachers, to focus on that aspect. We as a board or a collective ensure that they are running smoothly as a district. I'm not here to ban books.
I would agree. It's not my role to ban books, and I don't favor personally banning books, but I do believe that parents should have the right to make decisions for their child based on maybe developmentally, if they believe their child is not ready to read a certain text, or it goes against maybe family values, but it should be transparent enough where parents are involved, where text should be posted on the school's website on what students will be reading, and it's up to parents to say whether or not they want their child to be reading it, and that could be for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think banning books is appropriate, but I do think that these need to be age appropriate, and I also think that parents need to be involved. It's a much more complex conversation than just for this room, but as my fellow candidates have said, I think it's really the board's role to kind of oversee the process, not necessarily make some of those decisions.
This is a very complex conversation, and thank you for bringing it up. I guess, on one hand, it's not your role to ban books. On the other hand, and I do understand what you're saying, Rosemary, about lists for textbooks or whatever. However, within school libraries, and I'm new to Park Ridge, I've lived in the Pascack Valley for 40 years, but I'm new here for 3, so excuse my ignorance. But I assume every school has a school library? Okay, so has there been any issues that have come up about banning books in school libraries, which I think of as very different, because when I was younger, I went to libraries all the time, and I read anything. Many of the books that are now, and I'm very old, nevertheless, many of the books that are now banned by certain segments of our population, and I read them, and it was fine, and I learned a lot. So, but I do think that school libraries and librarians are under very different kind of constraint, and I'm curious to know how you would address that.
I mean, I would want to look at our policy, to be honest. That's an area that I would need to learn more about. What is our district policy on how books are selected and vetted for our school libraries? I don't know that answer, and that's something that I would be interested in learning more about. But in terms of what I was saying is when there are texts that are being read in courses, those are part of the curriculum, which should be posted on the school website. So there's, again, transparency. But in terms of what is posted, what's in a school library, I would have to learn more about what that process is and what's our district policy on selecting books.
Thank you.
I would say the same, just knowing what the policy is around books, how they're chosen, who is part of the committee that chooses these books, just to make a more informed decision.
I need to get informed as well. We're not on the board yet, so we haven't had to deal with these
Myself a
issues.
note.
And you need to be careful about this. Got it. Thank you.
I don't have a question, just that the curriculum guides are posted on the district website, and there are a ton of them, and all the books are listed. And in terms of our school, I'm sorry, I'm Christine Dow, I work at the high school. In terms of our 7 through 12 media center and our media center specialist / librarian there, Katie Haig, she is, and I can't stress enough what an incredible resource we have in this woman who's been doing this for 20 years and plus. And she vets the books that get brought in, and and I do media center duty, so I cover when she is on lunch, I cover the media center. She does not let us let students take out books, we have to look at the age that she has put is appropriate on the back of every single book before we allow them to take out that book. And I've seen her, if she thinks a child is too young or that it might not be appropriate for them because she knows everybody's school data, that she has made the parents write a note to have that kid allowed to read that book before she will allow them to take it out. I don't know that that's school policy. I just know that because Park Ridge, as you mentioned so many times, is an incredible district, and it is like having a private school for public education. We are able to have people like Katie Hake who put that kind of effort and love into everything that they do. So in terms of banning books, there is a process and a sheet that parents can always fill out to object to a book being in that library, and Katie will always have it reviewed with the board. There's a whole process, and a lot of the times when people get upset about a book, those same people have never even started to fill out the sheet regardless of how many times they've been told to do so.
Well done, Chris. Thank you for
Thank
that.
I'm still chewing on the career path preparation for our graduates. I heard you mention internship opportunities. Is there a work-study program? I have to think that students that are meant to go into technical career paths and such, my own niece, a pastry chef, that they're getting opportunities in high school to start, honing the skills for those.
Yeah, so that's option 2, it's called. It's a statewide requirement that all students, to what extent, that's data that I would be interested in learning more about, to what extent are juniors and seniors taking advantage of. I know like in a previous school district, for example, they did an option 2 night where parents were and students were invited to share opportunities, whether it was work study, an internship, leaving for half day for a technical school. I know these things exist, and to some degree they do exist in Park Ridge, but I would like more data from the counseling department to see how many students are taking advantage of it, because it can provide so much information for a student. They think they want to be a pastry chef, and they go and work alongside someone, and they say, this isn't for me. And what a wonderful learning opportunity for that student. So there is a pathway for career readiness, but I would like more information on how many students actually take advantage of that. And what can we do as a community, a board, a school district to really promote those pathways?
I'm not an educator, so I'm going to stay in my lane, but I will say that I'm supportive, right? I do see that not every student is going to choose to go to college, and there needs to be programs for them to be ready for life after high school.
One last thing. So where I work, we have a High School 2.0, which is essentially option 2, and there's various projects and different professions that schools and students can sign up for, and we have so many of our own Park Ridge residents, like Dan Duo, who does electricity, and reaching out to our own community, right, to see where can our students provide support and internships in those areas. So again, I would also look at the data too to see what's happening, but we have so many of our residents that are doing this work already, so why not tap into that?
When I went to high school many years ago, there was a shop department for people who were pretty sure they weren't going to go to college, but they wanted to learn some technical skills, mechanical skills, electrical, plumbing. Is there any kind of program like that anymore? I think they may have gone by the wayside.
No, so I know that has come up several times. There have been community members that have reached out to the board, I know just from being at board meetings. I think it's one of those programs that were pushed out several years ago, and to bring them back, to be honest, would be very costly. However, there are other pathways and options, right? So whether you know, maybe perhaps we can't have them in-house, but there are options for students and supporting students to do it outside, working alongside, you know, in a real mechanic shop or in a woodworking shop, so.
And this is where enrichment and co-curriculars are so important. It's such an opportunity for our students to like, just dip their toe into something that they wouldn't normally do, like woodworking, like cooking, like chef, those types of things, and having them as an essential part of our high school experience as well as our elementary and middle school experience.
So actually, I heard last night, that 8th grade, I don't know if anyone's aware, but the 8th grade class moving up for next year is teeny tiny, 53 students. So it seems to be like almost every other grade, large, then it goes small. A lot of these kids are obviously, the 53 are gonna also be going to other schools, so it's even smaller. I don't know if there's a way to look into finding a way, which I don't know if it's gonna work or not. A lot of schools now, public schools are accepting kids from out of town. Highlands, Demorest, etc. Bringing back maybe some of these extracurricular classes, maybe shop and sewing. I mean, that's how I learned how to sew. I was in high school. Anyway, that may help us look more, right, engaging, and kids won't want to leave the school, right? I don't know if you have any influx on you know, that. There's grants I thought about too. There's a lot of grants that could be provided in the state of New Jersey. I don't know who would write some of these grants or could look into, you know, as a board, what your thought about that. There's grants on security, right, to make your school safer. So what your view about those kind of two aspects of.
I think persistence from 8th to 9th grade are low overall across the state of New Jersey. I am dealing with that in where I work in school. And so we are also looking for ways that how our high school can appeal to our 8th grade families, right? Like what is the motivation for them to even want to come to our high school, right? What are some of the programs, some of the co-curriculars, the things that we offer? Not necessarily just the colleges and things that our students are graduating from, but like the high school experience, right? What sports, what different things that they can do and to look excited to going to high school. And so looking at that persistence data year over year to see, one, where our kids are going, and then two, how can we as the high school kind of talk to those middle school families, not necessarily when they get to 8th grade, because honestly, when they get to 8th grade, the decision's done, right? So speaking to them in 6th grade, 7th grade, even 5th grade, like speak to the families so they can get excited about our high school and what they have or can expect when they get to the high school level.
I think it comes down to just being creative. I think you gave several creative ways to solve, you know, a challenge, whether it's through grant writing. Usually the district has someone that writes grants that accesses those. But in terms of accepting students out of district for tuition or looking at why students leave, I think we need to maybe market our school district. I agree, starting in 5th grade, because many students' middle school experience in other districts are 6th, 7th, and 8th. So looking at 5th grade, 6th grade, and even at the middle school for high school, promoting and having, let's say, an open house where students and families, not only in our community, but outside communities, can really see what Park Ridge has to offer. I like what Ms. Dow was saying, like it's a private school experience in a public school. Like maybe that's how we market, but really marketing in terms of what we offer, right? Maybe looking at the data why students leave. Is there an area that we can improve upon or offer as a school district? But I think looking at it from a creative perspective could address some of those issues.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than to say, you know, we just need to understand the trends, right? We said this at maybe one of the earlier questions, like looking at the demographics, where students are going, what do we expect students to come into town in terms of development and families moving in. So it's really, for me, it's just an understanding of where the need's going and where the trend is and how do we address to that.
Okay, perhaps one final question, and then we'll have a little, two final questions, and we'll have a little mingling.
Thank you. Lisa Sturban, I live in town. I want to thank you all for running because I don't think that as a town, everyone understands the role of the Board of Ed. Because I know that until I was upset with the Board of Ed, I wasn't involved with the Board of Ed and I had really no idea. You're all unpaid. You're all, this is a second job really. And we're asking you to really be all in on everything. I think that I go to all Board of Ed meetings, I go to the PTO meetings, I've gone to the coffee talks with Gamper, so I'm there. I'm here, I will be in your faces, and I hope that it's at least two of your faces. That being said, I think that the community gets very frustrated because when they go to Board of Ed meetings, it's really almost like the definition of insanity, right? You show up expecting a different result, and it's the same thing. You ask questions, you can't give answers. As a profession, I'm an attorney, so I understand why you can't give any answers. However, I do think that, just like what's going on here, community involvement, that maybe the Board of Ed needs to have a couple of more coffee talks with the Board of Ed, where people have the opportunity to come out, because you have a vast knowledge, not only here, but in this community, who can come up with ideas. And we all have differences of opinions. And it's supposed to be nonpartisan, and that's, I am a strong proponent of Board of Ed being nonpartisan because you're here for the students and for the community as a whole. But other than just the lip service of, yes, I think we should do that, do any of the three of you have any ideas about how you really can involve the community so that we are dealing with the things like at Westridge, there's, it's dangerous to go from the front of the school to the back of the school, so we're gonna get sued eventually because someone's gonna fall and get hurt. At Coffee Talk with Gamper, there's plenty of parents who showed up who said that their kids have IEPs and that the district is not meeting those IEP needs. So these are real concerns for our district, and again, with the influx of students, there's a million things that go on and on. But is there a way that you think that you can involve the community, and you're going onto a board that has members that's been there for a while, but is there a way that you would propose to involve the community in discussions where they can get at least responses, where you have more than 3 minutes and more than the Board of Ed gets the last talking point at a meeting, and so that you have to bring that up at the next Board of Ed meeting. So everybody's frustrated. Everybody leaves the Board of Ed meeting incredibly hostile. There's 10 people who go, and then they come back to the next with a few friends, and then the friends come for, that one, they're like, I'm never going back to that. So this is, but in all seriousness, I'm making it sound kind of like a joke, but because I'm there every single time, I see how this is going, and I think we have a vast knowledge in the community, and how can you harness that? And, have some engagement with the community, not legally, but have these kind of coffee talks with the board.
So it came up earlier in one of the questions. I think we need to understand where the ground rules are, what the board can and cannot do. But it stands to reason. It seems pretty like basic, blocking and tackling. Let's meet with the PTOs. Let's meet with parents. Let's have informal listening sessions where we can actually engage in learning what's important to the community and then try to help that shape policy. So again, if we're fortunate enough to get elected, I think we can bring that to at least ask the questions, if it hasn't happened, why hasn't it happened yet? And then how do we, what are we allowed to do to engage the community like that?
Yeah, there are definitely legal or ethical guidelines. All of us participated in New Jersey School Board's just information session. We all attended and was very informative about what we ethically can do and not do as a board member, even before we get elected to the position. In addition to what Matt was saying, I also think there are avenues. When I hear like an IEP isn't being implemented, there's case manager. I am a firm believer in chain of command. So case manager, director of special services. There's a special education parent advisory group that's meeting, I believe, October 22nd. So these are other avenues where it maybe is because I don't know it's the board's role to make sure an IEP is being implemented, but it is the director of special services. So I think there are other forums and avenues, but again, getting that information out to the public, and also sharing like what we can and cannot do as board members in a public forum. I also believe like if there's a quorum of board members, like we can't say things
Yeah.
because then we're acting on behalf of the entire board. So, but I appreciate you saying like you learning more and more about what the role is, and even going to that, that workshop was informative for us as to what we can and cannot do as a board.
Yeah, I would second that. There's just limitations on what we can and cannot do. So I cannot address you speaking on various things. However, I could possibly speak to Cantor, or I can speak to the director of special education and just get more data on what they're seeing versus what we're hearing. So yes, I can listen to you. I will listen to you. I will not respond, right, on behalf of the board, because that's not my role when I'm out there in the public. And that's just an ethical, like, baseline, like, response, right? I'm not going to do that because there's other ramifications that can come about it. But I will listen, I will take that information back, and I'll meet with the parties who are responsible for it and get more data and information.
We're gonna have one final question.
Hi, Becca Nassos. Just a quick question on the New Jersey Education Association. Why did you choose to or not to be endorsed by them?
So I chose not to be endorsed by anyone, mainly because I want to serve on committees. One thing that I do in my role is hiring school leaders, whether it's a superintendent, whether it's a principal. And so by being endorsed by certain organizations, I don't want to be married to their ideas or what their expectations could be of me as a person serving on the board. And so it just gives me the liberties to serve on committees where I'm not being endorsed by certain candidates or certain individuals or certain interest groups. Because again, I don't want to be married to their views on what they think I should be doing or my
Okay, it's probably public knowledge that I am an NJEA member. So I'm a New Jersey Education Association member, being a public school employee or public school teacher currently. So I did ask for the Teacher Association endorsement, and I was proudly given their endorsement. I firmly believe in public education and the role of teachers and staff in our district. And the other is that I have served in other capacities, so I believe that I bring a wealth of knowledge and experience from, working with boards of education committees, being an administrator, a supervisor, and a teacher. I can see multiple perspectives, and being a community member and a parent. So I didn't see it as a conflict of interest. I am a New Jersey educator and a proud educator, and I'm thankful to get their endorsement.
Yeah, so I declined to participate for the reason of the conflict of interest. In doing some research, it seemed that if you receive that endorsement, it could preclude you from certain votes, certain negotiations. So I didn't feel like it would be fair to the residents of the town to create that conflict and not really be able to fully discharge my responsibilities if elected.
And if I could just say one other thing, being an NJEA member, I would have to remove myself from certain things such as negotiations and possibly personnel. So that's something that I would have had to do regardless of their endorsement or not.
Okay, I want to thank all the candidates, I want to thank you all.